"You're just a charity case now, Mom," my son Mark said, his voice impatient as he hurried me off the phone. I was just asking for help with a confusing medical bill. That night, at 3:15 a.m., a cold feeling of dread washed over me. I crept down to my late husband's old office, pulled the dusty leather-bound ledger from its hiding spot, and opened to the first page. I'd been tracking every cent Mark had managed from me for 2 years. What I confirmed in the silent house that night was worse than simple mismanagement. It was theft on a grand scale. The house felt cavernous and cold, a feeling I'd grown accustomed to since my husband, Arthur, passed away. He was the numbers man, the one who handled everything from our retirement portfolio to the quarterly taxes. He'd always say, "Eleanor, I love you have the heart and I have the head for figures. Together we are whole." After he was gone, the figures became a terrifying jumble of letters and numbers that swam before my eyes. Mark, my only son, had been so reassuring at first. He'd patted my hand at the lawyer's office, his expression a perfect mask of sympathy. "Don't you worry about a thing, Mom. I'll take care of it all. Just sign here," he said, pointing to the power of attorney document. "It's just a formality. It lets me pay your bills and manage the estate so you can grieve in peace." And I, drowning in a grief so profound, it felt like a physical weight, had signed without a second thought. I had trusted him completely. That trust had been eroding for months in 100 small ways. There were the calls I'd make asking about a particular stock sale, only to be met with sighs of exasperation. "Mom, it's complicated. You wouldn't understand," he'd say, his tone laced with a condescending pity that made me feel small and ancient. He and his wife, Jennifer, started talking to me as if I were a child. They'd visit, their eyes sweeping over my home, not with warmth, but with a strange, appraising glint. Once, Jennifer admired a porcelain vase Arthur had bought me in Vienna. "That would look so perfect in our foyer," she'd said, not as a compliment, but as a statement of intent. The vase was gone the next week. Mark claimed it had been accidentally broken. I found it for sale on an upscale consignment website 2 days later. The incident with the medical bill was just the final, sharpest cut. The term charity case echoed in my mind, a cruel brand on my dignity. Arthur and I had worked our entire lives, saving diligently to ensure we would never be a burden to anyone. We had built a comfortable life, a legacy I thought was secure. That single phrase told me everything I needed to know about how my son truly saw me, not as his mother, but as an inconvenience, a bank to be emptied until it was a hollowed-out shell.
My intention that night was not to uncover a grand conspiracy. It was simply to understand. The charity case remark had stung so deeply because it felt profoundly untrue. Arthur would have been appalled. So, driven by a need to reclaim some small piece of my own competency, I decided to examine the single credit card statement with the confusing medical bill on it. I wouldn't bother Mark again. I would figure it out myself. In the silence of Arthur's old office, the thin paper felt heavy in my hands. I found the medical charge, and then my eye scanned the other lines. And there it was. A charge for $2,800 at an establishment called The Gentleman's Pursuit, a luxury menswear store. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Arthur was gone. Mark wore off-the-rack suits. For a brief, dizzying moment, I tried to find a logical explanation. A mistake? A fraudulent charge from a stranger? That single, inexplicable charge was what compelled me to retrieve the old leather ledger. It was a ritual Arthur had taught me, a way of grounding finances in physical reality. Trust But verify, Eleanor. His voice echoed in my memory. My hands trembled as I opened to the most recent page. I found the corresponding date. The $2,800 charge wasn't there. Mark had omitted it from the simplified summary he gave me. My blood ran cold. It was no mistake. There was a deliberate concealment. Slowly, my heart pounding a sick rhythm against my ribs, I began to turn the pages back, comparing my secret, detailed bank statements to Mark's summaries. It was a waterfall of deceit. Investment management fee, M. Evans, $7,500. A fee he paid to himself monthly. Loan to J. Evans Holdings, LLC, $50,000. A quick search revealed J. Evans Holdings was registered to my daughter-in-law, Jennifer. They weren't just concealing luxuries, they were systematically draining my accounts into their own. The final, brutal discovery was the trip to Hawaii. I found the charge on my statement, $22,000 Paradise Resort. I looked at my ledger. For that entry, Mark had simply written, investment portfolio adjustment. He was stealing from me, from his father's legacy, and lying about it with an ease that took my breath away. The grief for my husband was suddenly eclipsed by a new, sharper grief. The grief for the son I thought I had. That grief quickly hardened into a cold, diamond-hard rage. The vulnerable widow disappeared from that office chair. In her place sat an accountant, a woman who had been betrayed, and a mother who now understood her only remaining option was not forgiveness, but justice.
For the rest of the night, I didn't sleep. I worked. With a methodical calm that would have made Arthur proud, I cross-referenced every single entry. I printed bank statements, highlighted credit card charges, and matched them to the entries in my ledger. I created a spreadsheet detailing every dollar Mark had stolen, with dates, times, and destinations. The final tally was staggering. $482,354.17. Almost $500,000. The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. He had been so systematic, so certain of my ignorance. He had counted on me being the feeble old woman he saw me as. He was about to find out how wrong he was. The next morning, I didn't call him. I didn't cry or scream. My first call was to a man named Stephen Walsh, a forensic accountant Arthur had spoken of with immense respect. My second was to a lawyer he recommended, a woman named Miss Albright, who specialized in elder financial abuse. When I met with her, I didn't come with tears and a confusing story. I came with my ledger, my spreadsheet, and a folder thick with annotated bank statements. Miss Albright, a sharp woman in her 50s with intelligent eyes, examined my work in silence. She spent nearly an hour poring over the documents. Finally, she looked up, a grim, impressed look on her face. "Mrs. Evans," she said, her voice devoid of pity, filled only with professional respect. "This is one of the most meticulously documented cases of financial exploitation I have ever seen. You've done 90% of my job for me. I want it all back, Miss Albright, every single cent." She nodded slowly. "Oh, we'll get it back. And based on this evidence, a civil suit is just the beginning. Given the scale and the interstate wire transfers to his wife's company, Mark is facing potential federal charges." I felt no flicker of maternal pity, no twinge of regret. That part of me had been cauterized by the theft. I had given my son my trust, my love, my support. He had repaid it by trying to bleed me dry. My husband had left me with more than just a comfortable nest egg. He had left me with the knowledge to protect it. It was time to use it. The confrontation didn't happen in my living room. It happened in the sterile, wood-paneled conference room of Ms. Albright's law firm for a formal deposition. Mark and Jennifer arrived looking annoyed. Their own lawyer, a slick young man who seemed overly confident. Mark avoided my gaze, wearing an expression of put-upon patience, as if this were just another of his mother's confusing demands. Ms. Albright began the proceedings. Mr. Evans, we are here because of certain financial discrepancies regarding your management of your mother's estate under power of attorney. Mark's lawyer scoffed. My client has acted with nothing but filial devotion. He has managed his mother's complex finances out of the goodness of his heart. She is, with all due respect, confused. That was my cue. I placed my ledger gently on the polished table. I am not confused, Mark. For example, I am not confused about the $5,000 consulting fee you paid yourself on March 12th of last year, or the $22,000 you charged to my card for your anniversary trip to Hawaii. Mark's face went pale. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably in her chair. His lawyer started to bluster, but Miss Albright cut him off, sliding a thick stack of documents across the table. This is a summary, she said, compiled by my client. Every transaction, every transfer, every fraudulent charge, all cross-referenced with bank and credit card statements. Mark stared at the papers, his jaw slack, the arrogance drained from his face, replaced by a dawning, panicked horror. He looked at me then, truly looked at me for the first time that day, and he didn't see a charity case. He saw the woman who had balanced the books for a major corporation for 20 years before he was even born. He saw the wife of a man who had taught him everything he knew about money, a legacy he had squandered and disrespected. You thought I was a relic, Mark, an antique to be stripped of its value and discarded. You forgot that antiques are often priceless because of the history they hold and the quality of their construction. The final blow came when Miss Albright's associate entered the room and served Mark with a notice that a federal prosecutor's office had opened a formal investigation into his and his wife's activities. Jennifer let out a small, strangled gasp. Mark just sat there, staring at the book that had sealed his fate. My book. The legal battle was brutal, but swift. My evidence was irrefutable. The court entered a summary judgment ordering Mark and Jennifer to liquidate their assets to pay me back in full, with interest and punitive damages. The federal case proceeded, and they were both convicted of wire fraud. Mark was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. Jennifer received 5 years of probation and was forced to dissolve her sham company. I took no pleasure in their downfall, but I felt a profound sense of justice. It was a clean, sharp, satisfying end to a painful chapter. They had made their choices, driven by a greed so corrosive it had dissolved the bonds of family. They now had to live with the consequences. I sold the large family home, which now only held ghosts and echoes of betrayal. With the proceeds and the restored funds, I bought a beautiful, light-filled condominium overlooking the ocean. I established a charitable trust in Arthur's name, a foundation to provide pro bono legal and financial services to elderly individuals who have been exploited. I found my purpose not in bitterness, but in empowerment. I started volunteering, teaching basic financial literacy at the local senior center. I shared my story not as a victim, but as a survivor who fought back with the tools she had. I taught them about double-entry ledgers, about checking bank statements, and about the quiet power of trust but verify. My life was my own again. The ledger, once a secret book of betrayal, now sat on my new bookshelf, a symbol not of pain, but of my strength. It was a testament to the fact that I was no one's charity case. I was Eleanor Evans, a woman of value, a woman of substance. Say it in a grave, solemn tone. And I had the receipts to prove it. I found peace not in revenge, but in reclaiming my life and my dignity, and in using my painful experience to ensure that no one else would have to endure what I went through alone and in the dark.